Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are and on whatever platform you are listening to us on. As always, I'm truly grateful for your support and for being a fan of our show. Today's topic is going to take us back into the world of AAU. For those of you who have not listened all the way back to episode 4, I did an interview in episode 4 with Coach Flouting about coaching AAU, and today's episode is going to be more big picture, more about running and directing an AAU program. So today we're going to be looking more, like I said, at kind of that big picture and what it means to be directing an AAU program. So if you haven't had the opportunity, I definitely recommend that you check out episode 4, more about the coaching end on AAU, and then this one is going to be more about the directing and running an AAU program. So I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Jacobi Couch, who wears many hats in the coaching world, and one of them is being an athletic director of an AAU program. Very excited to talk about this, Coach. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here and happy to share some experiences.
Very happy to have you here as well, and I know that you've had quite a wide array of experiences. So, Coach, let's go ahead and get started with an introduction to you, your basketball journey, your coaching journey, because I know you wear a lot of hats and you do quite a few things. So let's go ahead with an introduction with you.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Jacobi Couch. I am a Army veteran. I played in high school, and I'm able to coach at that school that I played in, which some people don't get to do, but it's a good experience, and it's fun to kind of go home and be able to coach there. I played at Dell City High School here in Oklahoma. I have 14 years of coaching experience in the AAU world, and then I have 5 years, of coaching of actual high school basketball. And then this year is my first year of coaching actual girls high school basketball, which is different. And, it's been a great experience. I have a, great athletic department. Shout out to Coach Dunn, who's athletic director at Dell City High School. And then shout out to Coach Webb, who's the head girls coach. I'm the assistant coach. He's the head girls coach. He's a phenomenal coach. He went and played at Kansas State, so she brings a lot of knowledge to the game. And then Coach Hatchett, who's the boys coach, and he does great with those boys over there. It has them in position for contending for state championships and all that type of good stuff. And then also, I work with in the special needs class with special education. I also help coach Special Olympics. So it's my 5th year doing that, and it's just something that I've grown to love, and those kids are awesome.
Yeah. I want to touch on that work with the Special Olympics, because I think you're my first guest who's been involved in Special Olympics. So I want to kind of talk about, for you, what made you passionate about working in that capacity, and would you encourage others to get involved and get involved with Special Olympics, even if they might not know much about it?
I'll be honest with you. I got into, doing special education as a way to coach basketball. And that was my first interaction really with kids with disabilities. And so I was really nervous at first because I just didn't know what to do or what to expect. But after doing it and being able to build relationships with the kids, you grow to love it. It's just something that I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else, because, you just grow to love those kids. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And then, just being a natural coach, it kind of segued into, going in with Special Olympics and helping out with the different events that Special Olympics offers, which is a great organization. And I just happy to be able to experience that with them. And for people who are wanting to get into that world, it takes a special person to be able to do it. It's demanding. You have to be compassionate. You have to, be able to care about other people more than yourselves at times. And so, I mean, it's trying, but it's very rewarding. Those kids, you know, they have every reason to be down about life, to, you know, be angry, but they're the most fun-loving, happy kids that you'll ever come around. And so right now we're doing a thing that we call spread the word to end the word. And it's kind of goes in with our special education. And so, you know, people use the R word, and it's kind of socially acceptable to use that word. And we're trying to, you know, eliminate that word altogether. And so it's just a big thing that we try to do.
Yeah, no, that's a great campaign. I know a little bit about it from just being a teacher and my experience working with some special education populations, and I completely agree with you in that it is very demanding. I do believe it'll take a lot of time, but as you've said, a lot of those people that you work with, especially the kids, like you said, they have a lot of reason to, you know, feel like really upset or feel really angry, but in my experience, it's just so much fun and they have a great positive outlook, and it's very, very rewarding if you go into it for the right reasons. And I think kind of what you were getting at and was that, you know, you have to really be in it for the kids, and if you're in it for the kids and you're in it to make a difference, there's going to be so much that you get out of it. And a lot of times, in my experience, I don't have as much experience as you do, but a lot of them are just happy to, you know, have people in their lives who really care about them and want the best for them, and are just willing to spend time. And it's great. I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and it's definitely a great experience as well. I would recommend it if you got the time and the effort to put into it.
Absolutely.
So as we kind of talk a little bit about your experience going into our topic about being the director of an AAU program, one of the things that you mentioned in your introduction is that you have spent, I believe it was 14 years kind of in the AAU world. So I want to touch on, what have you kind of seen over the course of the 14 years? How has AAU changed? And from your perspective, at least in Oklahoma, where do you kind of like see it going in the future?
It's changed as far as like where the game has, the game itself has changed. And now it's more, because back then, you know, you had a bunch of teams, but not as many teams as there are now. Like now you can, everywhere you turn, there's someone coaching a team. There's new teams popping up here and there. Whereas when I first started, you know, there were a few teams and you knew you're really, really good teams. And then you had everyone else. Where now is, you know, everyone is starting to level out the playing field, with kids going to different organizations and stuff like that. And here in Oklahoma, you know, it's getting bigger and bigger. The talent level is becoming better and better. So, you know, there are a lot of competition out there, and organizations are becoming more competitive, and there's not necessarily just one organization that is just shining over all the rest of them like it was back in the day.
Well, I completely agree with what you said about there just seemingly being new AAU programs just popping up all over the place, and just the influx of how many new programs there are. It is pretty staggering. I've just noticed it over the past few years. I can't imagine, you know, over the past 14 years, the amount of growth that you've seen. And I think that leads really well into my next question, in that there does seem to be a lot of people who have interest in whether it's, you know, starting an AAU program or in becoming a, you know, a director of an AAU program, and really looking to get involved in that way. And so my question to you is can you kind of just run us through what your responsibilities and what your job as a director entails? What is it that you do, and what is it that needs to be done in order for your job to be done successfully?
So the main thing is, like, when you are wanting to start up your own program, you have to be in it for the right reasons. You have to make sure that the kids being able to love the game is first and foremost. Because a lot of times, as coaches, as parents, we get in there and we start pushing kids, and we kind of take the fun out of it. So the most important thing is, you know, getting kids in and making sure that it's fun for them. Because, you know, there's, back to the last question, where there's organizations popping up everywhere, kids have choices of where they can go. So you have to be able to create an environment where people want to come and play for you.
Right.
So recruiting is the main thing that you have to do. Before even recruiting, you have to kind of brand yourself, figure out what your name's going to be, what your mission is. So one thing that I do is I have a mission statement that I give to all the kids. And I tell kids, I believe that I'm a really good coach, but sometimes I am not the right coach, or I'm not the right fit for every kid. Mm-hmm. And so we try to kind of fill each other out to make sure expectations, that has discipline. Because I believe, kids coming up, they want those things, mm-hmm. and they need those things. And so organizations that are successful and that have been around for many years, they all seem to have those kind of things the same. It's kind of a correlation between them. Tournaments, scheduling tournaments, trying to make sure that there aren't last minute tournaments, that you're kind of scheduling out in advance so parents know. So taking care of tournaments, whether it's in town, out of town. Of course, if it's out of town, you got to find hotels, make sure that kids have rides, uniforms, make sure all the kids have uniforms. They can still fit their uniforms, that if you have a mission statement or a brand, that those are on the uniforms. Like my uniforms always say family on the back. That's like my staple for my organizations. They always have family on the back. So that type of stuff. So you, back to the culture. So you're building and you're maintaining that culture. So you got to build it, but you also have to maintain it so that it continues to grow. Being able to get coaches who have the same vision as you and that have the same passion as you do and that are putting kids first. That is probably the biggest thing that, as an athletic director of a AAU organization, that you have to do, is you have to get the right coaches in there. Because if you don't, that can tear down your organization quicker than anything.
Well, let's touch on that a little bit more. So when it comes to directing that program and finding the coaches, as you mentioned, who have the same vision as you, what is it that you're looking for when it comes to finding coaches? How are you able to kind of make sure that you're getting the right coaches for the program?
Me, myself, I look for, again, someone who has similar vision to me. So who is dedicated, who will have time to be there. Someone so for example, being in the military, I'm very punctual. Like, I have to be on time. And normally I'm 15, 20 minutes early. Yep. And I always joke around with the kids is that you'll never beat me to a game, practice, tournament, or whatever, because I'm always there early. So I have a girl on one of my teams, and that's her mission, is to beat me to practice every day. And so having coaches who understand that and not walking in late, coaches who are determined to make themselves better. Because even though I've done this for 14 years, I still learn every single day. Yep. And so coaches who are willing to learn, who are going forth learning, who are putting kids first, who are fair, and who don't just kind of trophy chase, is what the kind of the phrase is in AAU nowadays, who are actually out there trying to develop. So those kind of qualities are what I look for when I'm looking to put a coach in front of one of my teams. And
with that, because you're in a position with being a director who also is a coach and has a lot of coaching experience as well, when it comes to the actual coaching, like the X's and O's, do you have a certain philosophy? Are you hands off on that? Because I feel like for me in that position, maybe one of the challenges I would have is how much control to give to my coaches, because I'm the director of the program, but I'm not the coach. And I also need to let the coach be a coach. So how is that in terms of what you want your coach to do on the court?
So I'll give you two different ways. So early on, I was extremely hands-on, and I was like, hey, this is the way it needs to be. But unfortunately, when you're recruiting different kids, some kids can't play in certain styles. And so coaches have to be able to coach to the to the strengths of their teams. So for me personally, the teams that I coach, we're very up tempo. So we like to get up and down the floor, whether it's girls or boys, we get up and down the floor. We do certain things as far as attacking up the sideline, banana cut, stuff like that is just verbiage that I use. And so with my coaches, I don't try to necessarily dictate what they do, but we try to all use the same verbiage and the same lingo when we're talking to the kids and try to stick kind of close. So if this coach has to do something over the weekend or has to go watch their kids play, another coach can step in and still kind of get the ball rolling without being completely lost. Right. So I try to be hands off, but still having a little bit of control where, okay, this is the philosophy, this is the lingo that we're going to use. So everyone is speaking the same. And these are the things that we're going to focus on as far as an organization, such as body language, being on time to practice, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think that having a philosophy, and I'll let you speak to that, I think that having a philosophy that probably helps in terms of getting the right coaches and the right players that you want. Like, is it in your particular program, do players who might be interested, like, do they know what your program is about? Do they know your play style? Do they kind of know the philosophy about your program? How does that kind of work with like recruiting the right players in terms of the way that they play? Is that something that, you know, the players know, like, hey, like if I join this AAU program, I know that this is what they like to do. Is that sort of how it works with your program?
Yes and no. So there are some kids that come in and they know, hey, if I'm going to play for Coach Kobe or Coach Couch, then I know this is how we're going to play. We're going to press. We're going to have to be in shape. He's going to hold us to this type of expectation. If we play for this organization, these are the things that we're going to have to do. But then there are some kids who are just kind of fresh and they don't really know what any of those things mean. And so they kind of come in and they learn and they adapt to what we're doing. So I always try to give like a trial period where you come in, you come to a couple practices, you see what we do. And if it's something that you think that you like, then we can welcome you aboard. And if it's not, then there's no hard feelings. Because like I said earlier, I mean, just sometimes we're just not right fits for people. And it's nothing personal. It just may not be the right fit.
Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of, you know, having players kind of come in and kind of see like what a practice looks like, or see, you know, get a feel for how everything is, because I don't know if this is an experience that you see, but I can, you know, imagine situations in which, you know, certain maybe AAU coaches or directors, like they really want a player, they really want to have this player, but they have to make sure that player fits like what your philosophy and what your brand is. And I imagine that sometimes, you know, recruiting can get pretty intense and can get pretty stressful for some coaches, because they want players, you know, no matter what, even if they don't necessarily fit the system that they're trying to have.
Yeah. And so I'm a coach's coach. And so I'm pretty confident in myself that I know if I could pull just about any kid and develop him into, as long as he's wanting to be developed and willing to be developed, I can develop him into the type of basketball player that is needed, that he wants to be. And a lot of the things that I do as far as our program goes isn't necessarily my program. I teach kids a lot of what they will need in basketball, period, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, and I tell my girls all the time, I said, because our organization is called Lady Pressure. And so I tell them all the time, I said, this isn't Lady Pressure basketball. This is basketball. So you'll be able to use this in your high school. You'll be able to use this going to college. I don't want you to learn just what we do here, but we try to expand it to where it's something that they can take and use in different systems, and they'll still be successful.
Right.
Such as, you know, I go down to set a screen and they switch and I go right back to the ball, or moving without the basketball, or being able to read a back cut, or knowing when to back cut, like stuff like that. It's not, you know, personalized to me. It's just basketball.
And that, well, it's transferable because you probably also, I'm sure, you know, your players play for their high school team, and, you know, they have possibly other ambitions and other things that they want to do. And so if I feel like it could be a disservice to a player that if what they're doing on their AAU team is only for their AAU team and they can't use it for their high school team, then that's going to create some confusion for that player. And I don't think that's a good situation for them to be in either. And so I want to kind of follow up with that, with kind of what you see in your area in Oklahoma, kind of with the landscape of AAU in terms of these new programs that are coming in. We talked about what your responsibilities are and what you think you need to do in order to be successful. When you see some of the new AAU programs that are popping up, how are you able to identify when you look at a program like, oh, I can tell that this program is probably going to do well and be where it needs to be, and then look at another and be like, I'm not so sure about that one?
I can always just look at how the players carry themselves and how they act on the court. And I normally can tell in warm-ups if a program is something that is going to be extremely successful or not. For example, we ran a tournament for the high school girls team. And so we ran a tournament. And so I was in the gym for 2 whole days, not coaching, but just kind of walking around, making sure everything was running smoothly. And so I got to sit and watch other teams and just stuff that you just hear and that you take in. You're like, wow, like this guy is coaching. But then you have other ones where you're like, okay, I like that. This guy is going to be able to take his program to different levels. It's just basically just what you see as far as how the kids act and respond in certain ways. You can tell, okay, this organization is going to be really good and this is good for kids. And then you can tell, okay, well, this probably isn't the best situation for kids, or this person is probably not the best person to be coaching our youth at this time.
And for the ones that are successful, is it a case of just like general like basketball and coaching knowledge? Is it the attitude and the way that they present themselves? Because I guess I'm not completely familiar with the AAU world, but I know that you don't necessarily have to be, the best coach or have a lot of basketball experience necessarily to start or even in some cases coach an AAU team. So I'm curious about if that's something that you notice. Is there just big discrepancies in terms of just basketball or coaching knowledge that you see?
I wouldn't necessarily say coaching knowledge, because a lot of times, coaches who are out there coaching are, a dad who, wants to spend time with his kid. And so he picks up a team and coaches. And then there's just some people who love being around kids and they just want to coach. And so what you see is the coaches who are encouraging, who set expectations, and you can tell that coach has set expectations just by how the coach is coaching. Somebody does something that doesn't meet their expectations, they address the issue right then and there, and they don't put winning over character. So I tell my girls all the time, it's character over winning any day of the week. And you can see those coaches who their best player is walking back on defense and they're subbing them out because that's just not what they're going to do. And you can hear the coach tell them, hey, that's not what we're going to do. That's not what we stand for. So those type of conversations and things that you see, you could tell that, okay, this organization is going somewhere, because real coaches, they don't just teach on the court. They teach, things that they can use off the court as well while the game is going on. Right. So it's not just all X's and O's. It's teaching you about stuff that you can use outside the court. Even though you're on the court, you can still use it somewhere else, and they're holding them to those expectations.
And I think that goes back to something that you brought up earlier about the reason why, that director, the reason why that coach is getting into AAU in the first place. I think you used the term like trophy chasing earlier, and that's probably something that you can identify right away with programs. Is like, are they just about, winning? Is that the only focus that they have, or are they trying to do something more? And I think that for the betterment of just the game in general, I feel like we just need to get away from just, chasing wins or chasing trophies at all costs, because I think if we do that, then that comes at the detriment, like you said, of things like character. And I imagine that if, it's winning at all costs, I don't think that that's really a positive or really that good of an experience for anyone. And I'm sure that that's probably something you've noticed as well.
Right. And I always say AAU basketball is for development. So no one's ever going to come up to you and say, hey, what was your AAU record? I don't think any AAU coach knows their AAU win and loss record or how many trophies that they won that season. I tell all my kids, and I never use the word winning because winning can be different things to different people. And so I always speak to being successful. And so with my teams, I tell them, I said, so a win for us is that we did things that we do in practice every day. We did those correctly. We were good teammates. We met our expectations. We played hard, and we didn't make the same mistake over and over again. So I tell them if we do, and I always speak to little things such as blocking out, rebounding, diving on the ground after a loose ball. Your teammate comes off the court. Everybody stands up, shakes their hand. Teammate falls. We run over and pick them up. If we're doing that consistently, then we're being successful. And I think those things, being able to do those things really good, the scoreboard will take care of itself. But there's some times that you can be successful and be on the wrong end of the scoreboard because sometimes the team is just better than you.
Right. Well, I've had this conversation with a couple guests here and with other coaches as well, and talk about the way that you measure success. And you know, if you lose a game, just throwing out a score, if you lose, you know, a game like 70-60, well, you still scored 60 points, so something had to go right for you to score those 60 points. There were still successes that were happening. You know, there were still things that ended up going well. And what it sounds like to me is that you definitely have a defined criteria for what success means, and you have a clear vision for what success is, so that you can, you know, rest peacefully at night, not you know, hanging everything on wins and losses. So this kind of ties into another question of mine about some of the lessons that you learned when you first started this job, and specifically, what can young AAU directors, team directors, or people looking to get involved in AAU, what can they learn from your experiences that you had from maybe even when you first started?
The first thing that comes to my mind is don't get me wrong when I speak about, you know, success over winning. I hate losing. Like I
agree,
hate it.
Coach.
And it burns me up. But I have to also understand that it's not about me. It's not about me. And so that's the first lesson, is that anybody that's wanting to do this job has to understand that it isn't about them. Like, it's bigger than them. There's a bigger picture than them. You have young lives in your hands that you come in contact with, and sometimes coaches are the most influential people in a kid's life. And so you have a big responsibility. So you have to understand it's not about you, that you have to kind of get over yourself. And that's what I had to do. I had to get over myself and say, Kobe, man, it's not about you. Like, you don't have to be mad 4 hours after the game and not speak to anybody. You know, and that was me when I was younger. I'm a competitor. I hate losing. And then you have to understand that everyone doesn't want you to succeed. So you have to pick and choose who you engage with, because there are people out there who don't want you to succeed because they feel like if you succeed, they're not succeeding. They measure their success against yours. So you just kind of have to see those people and steer clear of those people, because they can derail you as well. You can't be scared to let people go. And this is a lesson that I learned from my previous head coach that I coached under, who was a phenomenal coach. His name is Dwayne Bradley. I mean, he did great things here in Oklahoma in the coaching world. You can't be afraid to let people go. And so if you have a player who isn't buying in, sometimes you just have to cut ties with that player. And it sucks because you're like, I don't want to give up on this kid. But there are times where you have to make a tough decision, and you have to move on, because one kid you can't always save that one kid over the rest of them. It doesn't happen often, but there are times, and some coaches struggle with that, and everyone else feels that because, you know, they're giving so much to this other kid who just isn't buying in for whatever reason. And then you have to accept when kids want to move on. Now, I'm a prideful person, and so at first, when I first started, and a kid would leave and go to another organization, I took it personal. Like, what? Like, I'm a good coach. Like, how dare you leave me? You know, and again, it's one of those things where you have to get over yourself. It's not about you. And sometimes kids just have to go somewhere else to grow. And it's not necessarily you. Sometimes they've outgrown this situation and they have to move on to better themselves. And so you can't take that stuff personal. I always tell my kids, I said, if you come into a time where you feel like you need to move on, only thing I ask is for a conversation. I don't want to just wake up and you're not responding to text messages and you're not showing up to games or practices, then I see you playing for another team. Just let me know. I will always wish them well. I will always say, hey, if you need anything, feel free to reach out to me. Because I get it. And when I was younger, I did it. You know, I took that personal. And you got to understand that everyone won't like you. It's not about being liked; it's about being respected. And so I tell my kids all the time: is there are going to be times that you don't like me. And if you like me 100% of the time, I'm probably not doing my job well, because there are times I got to make tough decisions that you may not understand. So everyone won't like you all the time. Other coaches won't like you. Sometimes your coaches won't like you, but they'll respect you because they know that you do what's best for the kids. Right. And then the last thing is probably spending time. So you have to spend time with your players, with your coaches, so that that bond can build. There's nothing that's going to replace spending time with people. And once you do that, you start to build those bonds, and then these other things kind of take care of themselves.
Well, I think that the idea of just sort of like letting go of your ego and not taking things personally. I mean, I was the same way when I was younger, and I think that it is a tough lesson, because, you know, I would always take things personally if, you know, somebody, you know, wasn't responding the way I wanted to, or, you know, like you mentioned about, you know, holding on to that loss for 4 hours at a time. But I think that so many coaches can speak to that, and I think that as you're kind of spoke about, is just like that experience, and just like going through those experiences, and knowing that, like you said, it isn't personal, and that and especially about the kid who maybe just it isn't working out. If you're spending all that time with that one kid trying to get them to buy in, then you're neglecting all these other players, and then that's affecting them, and so that's also something to consider. And go ahead.
The one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn is that, and kind of go into the kid that you had to let go, is that you can't save everyone.
Yep.
Sometimes as coaches, we get kids and we want to save every kid, which is a goal, and it should be a goal if you're coaching, but you have to also understand that it's not realistic, and you don't want to get too high or too low. What I mean by that, whether you're in a game-like situation or on every day, you don't want to be way up here and then the game changes and now you're way down here. Me, myself, and I try to tell my coaches, I try to stay even keel throughout the whole game, because I feel like, you know, your players will reflect off of you. So if you're panicking, they're going to panic. If you're too high, they're going to be too high. You're too low. So, and then the disappointment, you're going to be disappointed at times on the way things go. Losing players, a player maybe not being loyal to you, or whatever the case may be. So those type of things you just can't take personal.
Mm-hmm. No, I 100% agree. And I think that the more experience you have with those situations, the less and less you take it personal, because you're used to it. You've had it happen before. You kind of understand. But I remember that those first times that it happens, I get that you can definitely take it personal. I really like the idea too of kind of being even keel. I think it just sort of keeps you calm, and keeps you, like you said, from going too high or too low. And I totally agree also that your players will be much calmer, and they'll play much better if they know that, like, the coach or whoever it is that's watching they're pretty relaxed, they're pretty calm, and just, you know, letting the players do what they need to do. I like that a lot.
And I try to say I try to say the same in every game, no matter if it's a 1-point game, 20-point game. I always try to be that same coach where I'm just sitting there kind of giving out instructions, getting up when I need to, because, you know, they never know. So that pressure is kind of dealt with.
100%. One of the things that you mentioned in one of your answers, which I thought was interesting, and maybe for people who are looking to, you know, direct a program or really get into AAU in that way, might be curious about, is you mentioned about having to make, you know, tough decisions. So what were some decisions, and I think one of them is probably the one they had to make with that player and being okay with letting him go, but what are some other, you know, tough decisions that maybe a young AAU director has to be ready to potentially make?
So a lot of it goes back to players, of course. There are going to be times where a player doesn't come to practice all week, but then thinks he's supposed to start. There are going to be times where parents may not have the money to pay for that tournament that weekend. And then you have to make a decision. Should I still let the kid play? Is it going to be fair to the other kids who played? And so those are kind of tough decisions that you have to make. When team fees are due, there are some people who can make them. There's some people who can at times. And so you got to kind of make that decision. Like, can I still allow this kid to play? Can I still allow this kid to be part of the organization? If you can't, because unfortunately it costs money to play.
Yep.
And as coaches, a lot of times we feel the burden of that, but those are just kind of decisions that you have to make. Kid is not performing at home. Like I tell all my parents, if your kid is acting up at home, please let me know, because we have ways to take care of that so that doesn't happen again. So does that mean sitting that kid? That kid gets a technical. Does that mean not letting that kid play the next half of the next game? Mm-hmm. Parents who are maybe out of control in the stands, having to have those conversations and say, hey, you may not can come back to the next game because, what you're doing is reflecting on your child.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of just those type of things that you have to be able to have those conversations, those tough conversations.
And I think that might be something for, those really looking to get involved with, running the program or directing the program, is that there's so much more than just what happens on the court. And that you kind of mentioned about the standards and the culture. And it sounds like for you and your program, one of the things that players know when they get in your program is that you care more about who they are as people and their performance and the way that they're just acting as humans. And like you mentioned about acting up at home, or maybe the way that they're behaving at school, and that a director has to keep that in mind. If that's something that they stand for and they want their player to, just be a good person, then that's going to take more effort, and they're going to have to give more time to deal with those sort of situations. Because I think it's easy, to just say, all I care about is what's going on, on the court, and that's it. But, I don't think that's the best approach necessarily to take either.
Right. Absolutely. And, I've made a thing of especially with my girls team, is I always tell them that I love them. Mm-hmm. And no matter what happens, I always try to make it a point to tell them that I love them, so that they understand beyond basketball. And I always say, it's bigger than basketball. And a lot of them will say that back to me. And so that's always a good feeling that that they know that you care about them better than basketball. Mm-hmm. And the thing with that is kids know. They can sense when someone's being genuine and when they're not.
Yeah.
And so when you're being genuine and you genuinely care, the things that kids will do for you, they will run through walls for you. They will play hard. They will dive on the ball. I mean, they will do whatever it is that you need them to do if you will be genuine and just show that you care about them. And all my players, I try to be involved as much as I can. Unfortunately, coaching high school basketball, I don't get to go to a lot of their games because we playing on the same nights.
Right.
And so, I just try to reach out to them and say, hey, how'd you do? And they know when I ask, how do you do? I don't care that you scored 20 points. That I care about. And they'll know me tell me I had 5 assists. I had 6 assists. I had this many steals, because those are the things that they know that I care about. And it's just talking and spending time with them.
And it does take more work, but it's more rewarding. Like, it's a more rewarding experience when you're investing in the kids as people, and you follow up with them and you have those conversations with them. And to me, that's the most rewarding part. That's what I like the most is getting to see them grow and develop as people, and having those relationships and being able to have those conversations, even those ones that go beyond basketball. To me, that's the most rewarding part.
Absolutely.
Now, I know this because I've been in education my whole working career pretty much, and from coaching. So I'm pretty well versed in working with parents and talking to parents, communicating with parents. But some people who get involved in AAU and want to run and direct a program, they might not be aware of what goes into that parent communication. So what have you learned over the years about the most effective way to communicate with parents and make sure that they're on board with what you're doing?
The most effective way that I have learned is just to be honest and transparent, and stand on your ground and stand on what you believe in. You can't allow, parents to make you move off of your morals and what your culture is. But I think that the number one thing is being honest. And I think everyone respects honesty. So if a parent ever comes up to me and asks me about their child, the first thing that I always say back to them is, can I be honest with you? Because that's all I think I know how to be, is be honest. And sometimes it's brutally honest, and sometimes it's what you want to hear. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be honest. So young athletic directors are going to have to, you have to be honest. You have to be stern. You have to be able to stand by what you say. So if you say, hey, this kid got a technical, he can't play the first half of the next game. If the parent comes, he complaining, that's the rule. I mean, that's what you have to stand on. But it has to be something that across the board, and you have to be fair. So I always explain the fair versus equal thing. And that, sometimes what parents may not see as equal is still fair, because certain kids need certain things at certain times.
Yep.
And so this kid may need something that your kid don't need at this time. But when your kid needs something and this kid don't, they will get what they need. And that's the important part, is that sometimes you can't be equal across the board, because talent isn't equal, situations aren't equal. People aren't always in the same situation. So it can't always be equal. But as long as you're being fair, I think people will understand, and parents will respect you when it comes to that.
And I think that it's just going to help anybody who's getting into AAU. It's gonna help you a lot when parents know what the precedents are and what the standards are, because there's nothing that they can say like, oh, you're playing favorites, or you didn't enforce this with my child the way that you did with the other, and that parents might not necessarily agree with you all the time, or they might not be happy with the decision you make, but they can't argue with the fact that you're consistent with enforcing it. And I think that, I'm sure over your years, you've had situations where maybe, parents weren't necessarily happy, but you knew what you stood for. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to, go to sleep at night at peace with, where everything was. And sometimes, parents aren't going to be happy. And I think one of the things that you kind of brought up earlier was not taking things personally, and just being able to sort of let go. And I think that can translate to parents as well.
Absolutely. Like I said, I had a kid who probably was my best player on the team, and he threw a fit in the middle of a game. I took him out, told him to get dressed and go sit in the stands. Was my best player. We ended up losing that game. There were some parents that were upset, but like I told them, it's always character over winning any day of the week. You can't be out on the court acting like that and play for me. You may go play for someone else, but you can't play for me acting like that. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to parents, it's just you have to be honest, and like you said, you have to be the same across the board and make sure that you're showing consistency. And I always tell parents when they have a complaint is come to practice. If you're worried about why your kid isn't playing as much, or why they're getting taken out at this situation when this other kid made the same mistake and didn't get taken out, come to practice, because a couple things will happen. One, your kid's probably going to play harder a lot of the times, and mom or dad is sitting in the stands watching them, especially if you're paying money for them to play and they're jacking around in practice. And then two, you will hear and see things that a coach has corrected. And so when you see, okay, this kid throws a pass with his inside hand and it gets deflected and turnovers, so when you see it happen, you can say, oh, yeah, coach got onto him about that. So that's why he's getting taken out. Not that he made one mistake and he's getting taken out. It's the mistakes that he's made in practice. Now he's doing them in games. So you can kind of see, okay, this is what the coach wants. So I'm in practice. I see what the coach wants. So on game days, my child isn't doing what the coach wants. Then I understand now my child has to come out. And I get it now.
And I think a big lesson from that for those who are, whether it's coaching or directing a team, is you have to kind of open the doors for your parents and be able to be like, here, like, come to practice, that like there's no secrets here, and that you can just watch them and watch them what they do, and have, an honest observation of, what's going on in practice. And that I think that in general, like, parents should be included, and they should know what's going on, like especially with AAU, like they're the ones paying the money for this, so they are invested in a different way than maybe in like even in a high school program. And so letting them know, like, hey, just come watch them, like here's what's going on, and hopefully they'll improve and make those corrections. But if not, here's what happens when that doesn't happen. So I like that a lot.
Yep, and you have to kind of, in a lot of things that some athletic directors get caught up in is that they get caught up reacting to situations instead of getting out in front of it. So what I do is I have a parent meeting at the beginning of the year, and I type everything up that we're going to talk about. I type up my rules, my expectations, and they sign it. And they get a copy, I keep a copy. So now I'm not speaking just to be speaking, I'm speaking to these certain things. So this is what we talked about. Your child did not deliver on these things right here. So this is why this is happening. And so when you do that, they can't really argue because they knew up front. And so that goes back to being the transparent and being honest and being upfront, is that, have those meetings with parents early. And then when you do that, you don't have to have as many later because you're not having to react to situations. So sit down and have a thoughtful plan on what all your expectations are.
And if you have that, I'm sorry, Coach. No. If you have that in the beginning, that's when the parents are probably at their happiest and they're at their most attentive. And you have that conversation early, like everybody's calm, everybody's neutral. There's nobody who's already upset at you probably. Right. And that signature is like, hey, like this is what we agreed to. This is what you signed. But that kind of goes back to something we talked about at the beginning, is I think if you're going to start one of these programs or run one of those programs, you have to know what those things are. You have to know like what you stand for and what you're about and what those expectations are. And you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to get caught up in being reactionary to everything, because then you don't have anything to go off of, because you never had that meeting or you never laid out whatever that culture was and everything. So I think that there's a lot of work almost on the just like the mental aspect for a director of like, what is it that you want? What are, the expectations or the standards that you're setting? I think a lot of that has to be laid out first. And it seems like you've done this where you've almost done like a bit of like soul searching, where it's like, what is it that I stand for? And I think that that's probably helped you be pretty successful. Absolutely.
And younger, I didn't know. Because, I started when I was 23, 24 years old. And at that time, I didn't even know who I was at that time.
Of course.
And so it took a while, because I'll be honest, when I first started, I was terrible. I thought because I played that I would be able just to get out there and coach. And it doesn't work that way. After years of being under my cousin and then seeing other coaches and just researching and studying the game, you start to get your own way. And that's what's important. And a lot of coaches will tell you that you take bits and pieces from different coaches.
Yep.
And you kind of build that into your own, and then you try to make that as perfect as you can. Because at the end of the day, parents are a big part of a program. They're a big part of a kid, because a parent can get or destroy a kid's offers or whatever it is that they have. And so not only are you working with the kid, but you're working with the parent as well. So that's why I always put family on the back of our uniforms, because it's not just about us on the court, it's about you guys in the stands as well. Mm-hmm. And if anybody has your back, it's your family. And so we built that. That's why it's there.
And that's a really, really good point about, you surrounded yourself by people who helped you, and you got your identity, and you mentioned about family, because over the years you're going to get, a lot of different kids and a lot of different parents that are involved. And if you're constant, the parents and the kids are going to be changing. But if you're constant, then that takes away, the variables. Like if you're different every year and the parents and kids are, different throughout the years, then it's completely inconsistent, and you almost have to like reinvent yourself every year. But if you have something that you stand for and that message is out there, then I assume, especially in your experience, like as you get more experience and as your name kind of gets out there, a lot of the parents and a lot of people in the community already know who you are, and they already know what you're about because you have a track record of consistency that you can go back on. And that probably also takes away a lot of potential issues when people in the community already know that.
Absolutely. Because, there are people out there that will, no matter how good you are, they will go and they'll run and tell the next person how bad you are or how bad of an experience you have. So when you're consistent on what you do, that other person has probably already heard about you. Like, no, that's not my experience with them. Mm-hmm. This may be something that you did or something that you have to go self-reflect on and see where you went wrong. Because I know, seeing him coach or being around him, that's not who he is. So when you have that foundation, you got other people who will go to bat for you. Mm-hmm. That will say, hey, this guy has done this, and this for my child. So I know that he's a stand-up guy. But you also got people who will throw dirt on your name. But, as long as you stay true to who you are, then there's nothing. I mean, you give nobody anything that they can say negative about you that can stick.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And what you said was a question I wanted to follow up on. Is one of the things you talked about a little bit earlier is you mentioned how not everybody wants you to succeed in AAU or as a director, and that you talked about not everybody is going to have like your best interest or want you to be successful. I'm curious about that, especially for people who are looking to get into the AAU game who might not be aware that that's even a thing that happens. In your experience, whether it's you personally or things that you see, what are some areas or ways where, I don't know if it's sabotage is the best word, but in what ways does that look like when people are trying to keep you from being successful?
They'll start, fake narratives about you. They will say that, you cheat, you steal players, they'll make up stuff that it's their reality. It's what they think, but their reality isn't always your reality. And so, they see that you're doing well and you're doing the right things. And so, the biggest thing, another thing is they're holding players back. They're holding them back. They're not letting them go. They're not letting them off the chain so they can go. And it's just, with a lot of people that are maybe not as successful as you, they say you're full of yourself. It's kind of hard to speak to just because, I see it, but it's hard to really kind of put it into words on how you see. But there are people out there that will spread false narratives about you and say, all different types of stuff about you. So, that's just something that you got to be ready for.
And then all of that kind of just ties back into what we just talked about staying true to yourself. Is if you are very consistent about what you stand for, what your program stands for, those things aren't going to stick, and they're not going to be able to, because you're going to have that track record. And like you said, I think when you become successful, it's possible that people are going to just be like, why are they successful, or what did they do, underhandedly to be successful? But in your experience, as you said, like you know who you are and you know what you stand for. And, if they're going to spend all that time like thinking about you and your program, that's time that they're not spending on theirs. And that's unfortunate that that's a decision that they decided to make.
Absolutely. And I'm one of those guys where if you're struggling, just come ask me. It's nothing. It's not a secret. There's no secret to doing this. So if you need help, I'm always willing to reach my hand out and help and share my experience with other people. Just like I will go out and reach out to someone else if I'm struggling in a situation or an area. Yep. It's all about us all coming together and just willing to help each other. Mm-hmm. And you see someone struggling people, and that they want to ask or come to you and ask you questions, try to figure out what you do, share it with them. It doesn't hurt. You can still do you and also help other people reach a level that they want to be, because the more competition that's out there, the better your kids are going to get. Iron sharpens iron.
And I would especially say that for those, looking to get into AAU who might not have like tons of coaching experience or, tons of experience of how that works, like reach out and connect with people, find other AAU programs that are doing things the right way. And if you want your kids to be better, then we have to, surround ourselves as well and get better as, coaches or directors or whatever the case may be, because ultimately the goal should be to better serve our players. And so you kind of talked a little bit earlier about taking the ego out of it and not, being okay with not knowing everything and surrounding yourself with people who do know more, and because that's just going to help your players. And ultimately that's what it should all be about, I would hope.
That's it. That's it.
I want to touch on for my last question here about just in general with the culture of AAU in your area. What are the areas that you are seeing success, you and other directors are seeing success, and that AAU is, being successful in this area? And then what are some challenges that you and other directors are perhaps looking to address?
What we're seeing success in is like girls basketball in Oklahoma is booming right now. Like there's so much talent out there in girls basketball that, I mean, it's probably the best that it's, or getting to be the best that it's ever been. I mean, there's so much talent. And so being able to showcase that and having people out there who are willing to showcase that and having coaches coming into to tournaments to watch. So getting them exposure and having different exposure outlets. Like we have several different exposure outlets here in Oklahoma that are kind of getting our girls' names out there. And it's not necessarily, oh, I'm going to go just watch this team. They're going out and they're catching everyone and they're sharing it. And, you see someone on Twitter that's from Oklahoma or whatever, and they got highlights, a lot of other people will just share it or retweet it.
Nice.
Just so, that person is getting outlets. So I think people are getting better as far as, getting the outlets out there and getting people seen. And then other people are just helping and supporting girls or guys or whoever, getting their name out there to be able to get whatever it is coming to them.
Yeah.
Some challenges would be, getting more kids access to be able to play. And what I mean by that is a lot of inner city kids, can't play basketball because of, the cost of playing, and it's one of those things where it's going to cost to play. I mean, there's just no way around that. You can fundraise, stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's still going to cost to get. So that's probably the biggest challenge is getting those kids being able to come out and play and be able to take away that cost to be able to allow them to play. So with my boys' side is I try to make it as cheap as possible for parents, because you deal with a lot of single parent homes where they want their kids to do something, but sometimes, the money just doesn't stretch long enough. And I never want it to be about the money, but,
of course,
you have to, these tournaments are cost. And so as an athletic director, you can't always come out of your own pocket to feed the bill, because you'll get overwhelmed. You'll get overwhelmed. It will stop you from loving what you do. And so that's a huge challenge. And I am, in the process of trying to work on being able to help with that by trying to open up a small community center here in the area that can help with getting kids in the inner cities to be able to get into sports. And I think, having gyms, gyms are very scarce. There's so many teams and there's only so many amount of gyms and time to be able to get in practice. So that's always a challenge, is finding gyms to practice in, good, consistent gyms. And then the old elephant in the room, those good old referees, challenges, getting really good AAU referees to get in there that are going to do the job and do it correctly.
And I want to touch really quickly on the financial aspect, because I think that's one that is always just tricky, especially for those maybe just starting, looking to kind of get into it, to try and figure out a way to convince people that it's worth parting their money to do this. And so, do you have like any advice or anything that you would suggest for maybe young directors, who are, trying to make that case and try and be like, how do I justify, my program as being one that's worth, somebody giving up their money for? What advice might you give to those younger directors looking to have that conversation?
So a lot of times as athletic director, as coaches, we spend a lot of time, in gyms and working with other people's kids a lot of the time. And so the biggest thing for me, if doing this for an AAU, as AAU wise, I've never paid myself. I've never charged a coach's fee. I've never done any of that because this is just something that I do because I love to do it. And so that's a cost there that a lot of times are inside of team fees, that if you take that cost out, that team fee goes down significantly.
Yeah.
Now, to each their own. So I'm not here to judge anybody or anything like that. But me personally, is I don't take coaches' fees and stuff like that. Like, people ask me all the time, like, hey, can I pay? I do this because I love to do it. And then fundraising. Like, you have to be on fundraising, especially if you're in a area where, people are having trouble paying. You have to fundraise. And then for people wanting to spend their money, if you have people that are wanting to spend your money, you have to make them, they have to understand that this is an investment. It's not a fee that you're paying. It's not like you're just giving your money away to somebody. It's an investment in your child. So if people understand that this is an investment, they're more likely to get the money, find the money, come up with the money, or help raise the money because they're investing in someone that they love. And at the end of the day, that's all it is you're investing in that person because they're getting on the court, they're getting better, and they're starting to get more opportunities because they're getting better. So just kind of drilling in the investment part of it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's a great way to frame it. Like, you're gonna put this money in, but this is what you're gonna get out of it. Here's all of the things that they're gonna get out of it, and here's all the things that are not just basketball wise, but other things that are going to help them in other aspects of their life as well. And I think that's a really good way to frame it. And I think that's another thing for whether it's a director or a coach to consider is when these families are parting their money, like, what are they going to be getting out of this experience? And I think if a coach or director can think about that and think like, okay, at the end of their time with me, I know they're going to get this out of it. I think that then it's a lot easier to kind of have that conversation with those potential families.
Absolutely. Just have to kind of make it full circle and make them just understand it. Like I said before, it's an investment.
Yep, absolutely. It's an investment.
Because
go ahead.
What I've learned is that people will have money to invest in something. People don't like to waste money and just throw money away, but they'll invest, such as cars, phones. They invest in stuff. So if something is an investment and they understand it's going to help them, then they're more likely to stick around.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I like the way that's worded a lot. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So to wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So I'll start off with this first one here. What is a coaching moment from your coaching career that you think others would be able to learn from who are listening?
Coaching moment. I didn't have. There's been so many.
I know, right? It's the kind of the hardest question. There's so many that you could choose from. I get it.
So let me go with a recent one.
Sure.
I had a young lady come up to me after a tournament. She's a player on my team, and she comes up to me, her eyes are watering, and immediately I think, okay, she's about to complain about playing time. And so I'm already getting ready to be in defensive mode about, okay, this and this is why you didn't play more. But she says to me, Coach, she said, I'm disappointed in myself. She's like, I want to figure out how I can better help my team. And then that's what she said to me. And it kind of took me back because I wasn't expecting that. So that coaching moment to me was being able to not be defensive, but to be able to really listen to what your player is saying. And so we had that conversation. And ever since then, like, she sent me a message after that, and it kind of just blew me away because kids don't really do stuff like that. So I guess I don't know if that's what you mean, but that's kind of a coaching moment that stood out to me.
Well, I think that what I could take away from that is you think you might know what a player's going to ask you or say to you, but you don't know until they say it. And so, you never know. And players will surprise you. And even after being around the game for many years, like you have, like there are still, these moments where a player will say something that completely catches you off guard. And I think it's just kind of a moment to, think about that. You never know what a player might be having on their mind or what they want to tell you. And in this case, it took you back, but it was one that obviously stuck with you and is one that is probably a unique memory that you have.
Right.
And finally, the last question, it's not even a question. The final thing that I do, Coach, is I give every guest what I call my 60-second soapbox. That's your opportunity to get out your final idea, final thought, kind of your closing message that you want to leave our listeners with. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. The floor is yours, Coach. Go ahead.
All right. So I guess I would start by saying, basketball is a beautiful sport because and sports in general is a beautiful sport, or beautiful because it teaches more than just what's inside the lines or on the field. So as coaches, we have to be able to model what the expectations that we set. And that's a huge thing for me is I always tell my players, between those coaches, those hours that we're in practice, this is how I am. I put on my coach's hat. But after that, no matter what you did in practice, after that, we're going to hug, we're going to laugh, we're going to talk because, again, it's not personal. And so just being able to distinguish between being the coach and then being that person that kid can count on and talk to, because you're going to be, a very influential person in their life. And so you have to make sure that you are modeling those expectations that you're setting for them so that they understand, okay, this is how it's supposed to be done. And they'll remember that, and they'll always be able to come back to you and just have an open door. Even when your season's over with, you have to be able to still be able to connect with your players.
I like that a lot, and I really like that. That just the idea of you're when you're coaching, got that that coaching hat on, but at the end of the day, you care about them as people, and you want to know how things are going, know that you care about them, and know that you're there for them as well. And I think that's such a crucial piece as well, because like you said, those are the relationships that are going to last for a long time. And those are the players who are going to stay in contact with you and reach out to you. And to me, that's kind of what it's all about is forming those bonds and, just helping them develop as people. And when it's basketball time, like you said, it's basketball time and we're getting to business, but when that's done, that you still care about them and you still value them as people. I really like that a lot.
Absolutely.
So, Coach, I want to thank you again for spending some time kind of just talking about AAU and so much more. It was a really great conversation, and hopefully there's a lot here that our listeners can take if they're looking to get into AAU and looking to direct a program. So, Coach Couch, I want to thank you again. Good luck going forward. Hopefully you and yours are able to stay safe, play some games, and get back to the game that we love. Thank you, Coach.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And all of you listening, thank you guys so much. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.